Liberal MP Chris Rath gave the best speech ever against the Radical Greens abortion bill, but then one leftist journalist and one leftist MP got their knickers in a twist and he apologised. We need to stop apologising for telling the truth. And that's today on The Dr. Joe Show. We've now reached 21,000 subscribers and I'm so excited by how much our show is growing. If you are new here, could you please press that subscribe button? The more people that subscribe, the more we grow. When the Upper House was debating the live births bill on Thursday a week ago, Chris Rath, who I'd never met and actually not really come across, stood up in the Parliament and gave an incredible speech. He is a young Liberal MP, probably one of the youngest Liberals in the party room in New South Wales. And when he spoke eloquently, articulately, with references, and just in a way that was actually persuasive about why it is wrong to kill babies and also why it is so wrong to force doctors, nurses and midwives to be involved in it. And his speech was genuinely a great speech. And you can't say that much when you listen to these parliamentarians a lot, as I have. Most of them drone on, most of them are boring. That's even the ones on our side. Chris Rath, by contrast, gave a killer speech. And everybody in the gallery thought it. People were elbowing me going, who is this guy? He's fantastic. And I certainly sat up and took note. Now, the thing that I've worked out, having done this pro-life advocacy for about 2.5 years, close to 3 years now, is that the minute you do something really well, the other side just goes into overdrive because they know they've got to take you out. And that's exactly what happened to Chris Rath. In particular, they whipped up a faux drama about this one thing he said. Let's watch.
There is no such equation to work out whether one life is worth more or less than another. And certainly no such equation exists when it comes to ending life, as I have expressed in the past. No person should have the power to determine what constitutes a valuable life. Attempts to do so in the past have led to some of the greatest atrocities known. We only need to think of the historical prevalence of killing civilians en masse in warfare, the use of life-threatening shock therapies on the disabled if they weren't murdered at a young age, and perhaps worst of all, the Nazis leading an entire people to believe that Jews were subhuman, worth less as a human being than you or I. Humanity's inability to make a sound value judgment on which lives are worth living leads to my view that all lives are worth living.
Now, you probably didn't catch what the left managed to whip themselves up into hysteria about because it actually all made perfect sense, didn't it? What Chris Rath is pointing out is that at any point in human history when one group of people with power and privilege have dehumanized another group, another subgroup of the population, that is when the world's greatest human rights abuses and atrocities have taken place. And so he references mass death of civilians in warfare. He references the disabled. And, you know, we might think about slavery when those people who held slaves viewed slaves as subhuman, which is why you could force another human being to work for you for free and often using brutal means of control. We might also think of the Rwandan genocide when the Hutus convinced everyone that the Tutsis were cockroaches and dehumanized them to the extent that 1 million Tutsis were killed in 100 days. Chris Rath references, and what he says is one of the world's greatest atrocities, perhaps worst of all, the Nazis leading an entire people to believe that the Jews were subhuman. Now, that's completely true. What Chris Rath said is 100% accurate. And in fact, you and I and any reasonable person might think it's actually a good thing to reflect on one of the world's greatest atrocities in Nazi Germany and how the Jews were treated and dehumanized, because that's how we can stop ourselves repeating this and doing this again. But of course, that's not how the radical left thinks. And Alexandra Smith, the political editor for the Sydney Morning Herald, no less, comes back out swinging with a hit piece. Now, just a little bit of context here. Alexandra Smith is not an opinion writer. She is the person who is supposedly a journalist charged with informing the people of New South Wales around political debates and political happenings in the Parliament. She's not meant to be taking sides. Now, this is the same Alexandra Smith and the same masthead that did not report even once on the community actions or the two rallies, the first which attracted 5,000 in March, the second which attracted 10,000 in May. The Sydney Morning Herald didn't even report once on the very strong community opposition to this bill. The very first article, in fact, they write, about this New South Wales Upper House debate and about this bill is about Chris Rath and how he's apologised because he referenced the Nazis in his speech. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck does he have to apologise for? And also, why did he apologise? But I just want to give you a bit of kind of intel on how this all goes down when a hit piece lands in a paper like the Sydney Morning Herald. So when Chris Rath gets up and makes that kind of speech, a powerful speech that talks to the human rights of babies in utero and the conscience rights of health workers, the lefties in his own party whip up a frenzy to stab him in the back. And so there are all of these lefty liberals who really belong in the Greens, who are actually part of Chris Rath's factions, the moderates, and they themselves work with left-wing journalists to take him out. Now, they can't do it on the record, can they? Because that would look bad, because, no one likes it when you stab someone in the back and you know who's doing the stabbing. But what they do is this cowardly, weaselly act where they leak to Alexandra and they say, do you know what he said? And then she rings him up and says, people are very upset, that you've compared abortion to Nazi Germany. What a disgraceful thing to do. How disrespectful of the Jewish people. And so then she puts all of that pressure on him. And while he's under that microscope, Chris Rath buckles and he apologises. And the article quotes him saying, Rath later issued a statement, there was no intention on my part to draw any comparison with Nazis. I regret and apologise for the insensitive language that was used. Now, there was no community outcry over this. There wasn't Facebook posts or Instagram posts or Twitter posts or the Jewish community groups coming out and saying, how dare he do this? Nobody said anything. There was no actual scandal or story here. But the way that this works is lefties in his own party stabbed him in the back with a left-wing journalist who's claiming to be, some neutral commentator on politics for the state of New South Wales. And she tells him, people are upset. He then stupidly apologises. She then writes the hit piece, New South Wales Lib MP invokes Nazis in debate over widening access to abortion and apologises. It's a total media beat-up, and you can see that when you actually read the article because there's no community outcry, there's no concern. The only person that criticises Chris Rath for bringing up the Nazis in his speech about abortion is Alex Greenwich, the most pro-abortion, radically left MP in the New South Wales Parliament. She couldn't find anyone else because there was nobody else. Listen to what Greenwich says. Sydney Independent MP Alex Greenwich, who introduced the bill in 2019 that saw New South Wales became the last state in the country to decriminalise abortion, slammed Rath's comments. These comments are heartless and ignorant to healthcare needs of women, Greenwich said. Chris Rath believes in government so small it fits into a woman's body. Never mind the fact it's factually inaccurate, Miss Alexandra Smith. New South Wales was not the last state to decriminalise abortion. That happened in South Australia in 2021. But leaving that aside, because never let facts get in the way of a good story, this quote by Alex Greenwich, that Rath believes in a government so small it belongs in a woman's body. How is this the basis of an article? The radically left comments of a radically left MP who is on the record for being radically pro-abortion, that's not a headline. 10,000 people rising up and marching against a Greens abortion bill that tramples over the conscience rights of doctors and would compel public hospitals to perform abortions. That's a headline, but not for the Sydney Morning Herald because it doesn't suit their false narrative that abortion is healthcare and that everybody agrees with them. They can't show 10,000 people marching because that would undercut their ideology that they're on the side of the majority. So what's crazy about all of this is that Greenwich doesn't even reference the Nazis in his comment that is used to substantiate her article that people are upset because Chris Rath likens the deaths in Nazi Germany and the dehumanisation of the Jewish people to the dehumanisation of children in utero. Like, the actual article doesn't even substantiate that because even Greenwich doesn't make that point. He just makes a classically pro-abortion argument that, government should not be controlling women's bodies. Clearly, this is the journalist herself who's trying to whip up some kind of article. What it brings to bear is the left's incredible hypocrisy when it comes to remembering Nazi Germany and the ability to reference it. Because if you're on the right, like Chris Rath, and you dare reference the obliteration of children in utero in a way that also as echoing the dehumanization and obliteration of the Jewish people in Nazi Germany. If you do that, you're somehow, a really disgusting person, you deserve a hit piece. But if you're on the left, well, you can call people on the right Nazis. I mean, Trump's called a Nazi every day. The Sydney Morning Herald had headlines about Elon Musk apparently doing a Nazi salute, which was the most ridiculous assertion ever, just because he raised his hands in the air in victory. But, when you're on the left, totally cool to weaponize the Nazi label and to call anybody else a Nazi. But if you're on the right and you dare bring it up, then for Alexandra Smith, you're worthy of a hit piece. And what gets lost in all of this is that Chris Rath is actually right. Because when we think about the way the Nazis successfully dehumanized an entire population, they did it through making people hate Jews, making people distrust Jews, thinking of them as rats or as people that were stealing from us, from the Germans, as people that were less pure, less noble. And the same language is used for babies in utero to dehumanize them. They're parasites, they're fetuses, they're clumps of cells, they're stealing from the mother's life source. They're threatening her life. Their very existence is parasitic in that they're taking from the mother. And the crazy thing is the Jewish people were called parasites by the Nazis, which is exactly what the pro-abortion camp says about babies in utero. Hannah Ferguson on SBS Insight referred to her unborn child who she took less than 30 minutes to think about killing. She called her child a parasite. And why do they use this language? Because what do you do with a parasite or a cockroach? You exterminate them because they're disgusting, they're gross, and that is the response that you have. And that's why they use this language in the first place. The death toll from Nazi Germany is dwarfed by the death toll of abortion, which is another reason why the comparison works. Over 6 million Jews were tragically, horrifically exterminated, killed, annihilated in Nazi Germany, something we never want to see repeated. But in abortion, in Australia alone, it's 88,000 a year. But the worldwide death toll on abortion is 73 million every year. And I want to talk very briefly about the way the Nazis used abortion to exterminate the Jewish people. This is something many people don't know, but the Nazis made it illegal for Aryan Germans, so, they're blonde-haired, blue-eyed German women, to have abortions because they said it was their job to produce these babies. The single biggest patriotic act these women could do was to produce more Aryan babies. But the flip side of this was Jewish people had to abort their babies, and these incredibly traumatic stories of these forced abortions that the Nazis did on the Jewish people, and the fact that they would actually do experiments on these babies and use them for research. And the final thing we need to talk about, guys, and this is probably the most important thing, because we can't control what left-wing journalists like Alexandra Smith do, or MPs like Alex Greenwich, or lefties in, Rath's own party like Jackie Munro or Felicity Wilson. We can't control what they do, but we can control what we do. And so I want to say at the outset, I love Chris Rath. I think he gave a brilliant speech. He spoke with conviction and purpose and clarity that is rare in a politician. As I said before, most of them are boring. Most of them are mundane. This was not that speech. And he's on our side, and he gave that speech. So that's fantastic. But having said that, this is the thing, Chris Rath and everybody else who is following me and wants to see abortion become unthinkable, this is what you need to know. We do not apologise. If some lefty journalist calls you and says, people are really upset at the speech you gave, you just say, go away. You say, you're questioning me based on a false premise and some whipped up story that I know is nonsense. Don't waste my time. I've got real things to do. You don't buy in to the fake drama. You don't accept their premise. You never apologise. Chris Rath, if he felt passionate enough to make that speech comparing abortion and the scale of the dehumanization to Nazi Germany, he should have had the temerity to say to Alexandra Smith, what the heck are you even talking about? It makes sense. The Jewish people were killed en masse because people dehumanized them by calling them cockroaches and parasites. That's exactly what's happening to babies today. That's the story you should be writing. He shouldn't be entertaining this, and he never should have issued a statement saying sorry because he didn't have anything to apologize for. So if we're going to win this fight, we need to stop playing the games and buying into the BS of the left-wing media establishment, which is just pro-abortion. And when they call us names, we just need to fight back harder. Now, I know it's easier for me to do it because I have a social media platform, but as I keep saying to Liberal politicians and to the pro-life movement in general, social media is the way we reach people directly, and we need to pick up our game there. Thank you for watching, guys, and that's today on The Dr. Joe Show.